Hello, everybody. We're back. Bardown Beauties, presented by SodaStick.com, episode 20. That just sounds nice. That just has a really good ring to it, right?
Yeah, let's do only like numbers of 10 from now on. So next episode's going to be episode 30.
Exactly. Yes, I like it. I'm down. I'm totally game for that. 100%.
Yeah. In like 3 weeks, we'll be at episode 100.
I know, right?
You do Roman numerals from here on out?
There we go.
I don't know Roman numerals.
Episode
That was
X.
something
What?
I don't. I'm embarrassed to say that. Like, during
They're
the
really
Super Bowl,
easy to learn.
I'm always like, what? I don't know. Like, I'll
EX22. Great. Wonderful. I don't know what that means, but happy to be here.
Exactly. Like, looks great. Sounds good. Love it. But we do have, I guess, some kind of sports topics to discuss.
Things are happening.
Things are happening, kind of, like a little bit.
They're trying to happen.
They're trying to happen. LIU actually added a men's hockey program, which is very, very exciting. We'll see how that changes the dynamic of college hockey. Again, you have your haters out there, which I don't ever understand. Like, people in hockey, it's so funny because my mom is one of these people who complains that it never gets the attention that it deserves, right? Like, oh, people don't like college hockey or they don't like this hockey. And then when it grows, they're all up in arms and mad, like, no, well, that's not supposed to be, hockey doesn't belong in the desert and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but you can't have it both ways, right? Like, it's so great for the game. It's so great for college hockey, especially when there is so much, not turmoil isn't the right word, but there's just a lot of like, it's hard in college hockey, especially, you look at Alaska and their programs. And I mean, it's a tough one to sell.
Yeah, it's the thing is hockey, the more places you put it, the more kind of fans you can get, the more the sport can grow, the more money it can get, the more they can do. So there's downsides to expanding and putting teams places, obviously, because at the end of the day, yeah, you could lose money, it could not work, yada, yada, yada. But what is the harm in trying to grow the game? So I totally know what you're saying, Jesse. I hear people say that all the time too. It's like when people were mad that there was a hockey team put in Vegas. It's like, That's a good thing. You want more Vegas-born people to be exposed to that. You want to grow it. You want to expand it. So I know sometimes I think it's mostly a Minnesotan thing, honestly, and maybe a Canadian thing where we think it's like just ours and no one else can have it. And it's like, no. You want other cities, other states to be exposed to it and to continue to grow it. So it is a good thing in the long run, and especially at the college level, because sometimes they don't get to college level athletes don't get to move on to the pro level. That's their last chance to play a sport in that sense. So it's good to have these college teams continue to grow and give more opportunities to student athletes, because that might be their last chance to do something like that.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, obviously I'm biased a little bit just in the respect where I work with USA Hockey. So that's our whole goal, right? Is to grow the game. And so it's so funny, but my mom being a traditionalist, she wants it in Minnesota. Like, it doesn't belong anywhere else. It belongs in the cold states, and this is our game. And it's like, but you need to grow. Also, sorry guys, I'm a fan of the Big Ten. I mean, again, it's WCHA isn't coming back. It's you have to move on. Like, I love those rivalries too, and I totally understand how much they help the smaller schools and how great it was to have that Minnesota competition and yada yada. But at the same time, Big Ten having that support behind college hockey is huge. To be able to have a huge association, the NCAA, back the game like that and allow for other teams to come in and grow, that's tremendously huge. And the TV rights and everything, again, it's giving the game more exposure. I did go for games, and yes, it is empty, and I understand, but also the people that are griping about the empty seats, why aren't you buying tickets? Like, why aren't you there? Like, it's you want it to work, then you have to help make it work. And again, it's not coming back. We have to move on. It's kind of like the North Stars. I respect them, but they're not coming back.
Right.
Just kind of.
It's okay to be nostalgic too, and to say, hey, that was a good time. But at the end of the day, you gotta accept that new teams are going to be coming, that things are going to change over time, and just find new things to be excited about, find new rivalries to be excited about, and continue to grow the game that way. And there's nothing wrong with new teams coming in. And think about it, it's like, do you want the NHL to still be 6 teams? Do you want the NWHL to still be 6 teams in 50 years? No, you want it to grow. You want more rivalries. You want things to change. I miss like the Northwest Division like nothing else. I loved the rivalries in that, but the Central Division brings new fun rivalries too. So it is hard to kind of accept the change sometimes and bring board new teams and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's a good thing for the sport, and
Right.
it brings more money in, it brings more opportunities in, and that's what you want for sure.
Speaking of the Northwest Division, our guests are very familiar. We've got Wes Walz and Richard Park. Super excited to have those guys on. So be sure to stay tuned for segment 2, where they'll talk a little bit about their team, their squad, 2003. We're going to talk about that, since I know everybody's been watching that on Fox Sports North. They've been doing a tremendous job of replaying some of those classics. And on to the NHL news. We actually caught up with Kevin Fiala of the Minnesota Wild. He's over in Sweden. He's actually skating. Sweden is not on lockdown. He said restaurants are open. Him and a couple other NHLers have gotten together. None of his teammates, Victor Rask is over there too, and Jules Eriksson Ek, but they are a couple hours away from him. So he said he wasn't together with them. But he's staying in shape, which is exciting for everybody, because I know everyone's just yearning to hope that he continues his ascent up and continues to wow us. So it was good. It was good to catch up with him. And then it's fun to think about him and Kaprizov. Still hasn't signed as of right now.
Oh yeah.
But electric. Alexis and I were actually joined a couple other podcasts with Giles and the goalie and Locked On Wild guys, and did a Around the Horn, and got to talk a little bit about Kaprizov too, which Alexis, how excited are you for this to happen? It hasn't happened yet, but there's no doubt that it eventually will.
Well, I think people are clinging on to this right now because there's not much else going on, and people already were ecstatic about Kaprizov and when he was coming and what he was going to do when he got here. And now that it's getting so close and he could sign any day now, everyone's like, oh my God, it's actually happening. Like, I know my dad was talking about the other day. He's like, Alexis, do you understand that, like, we have never had a player like this before? I was like, yes, I understand that. This is a very exciting thing. So it's really fun. And, you know, hearing Fiala talk, I know he had a pretty funny quote from his interview. He said something like that the fans cheer more for him now that he plays really well, and he wanted to like keep playing well for the fans. And so he's aware of the implications. And once Kaprizov gets here, I know a lot of people are talking about, ooh, Kaprizov and Fiala on the same line. Can you imagine that as a Wild fan and watching that happen? So
let me wipe the drool from my mouth.
Yeah, no,
it would be amazing.
It's pretty fun to imagine what kind of damage that they could do. So yeah, this is Wild fans and Minnesota media, and we've been waiting for this for a very long time. And I know a lot of people were scared, you know, is this going to happen? Is he going to sign? Is there going to be more setbacks? Is there going to be this? Is there going to be that? And so it's really exciting to watch this unfold, and hopefully we'll have some new news to bring you guys soon about him signing and all of that stuff. But we're waiting as well to see how that all unfolds, but it could be any day now.
And we will be sure to do something live once he signs, if that's what you guys want. We're trying to figure out the details of that because obviously we're not together. So it's a little bit harder than the trade deadline or Bruce Boudreau reactions and stuff like that.
We'll get you something though.
We'll always figure it out, guys. And then kind of the final little bit of NHL news. There's been a lot of rumblings about what the season does. The NHLPA actually released a statement saying they haven't been told of anything. There hasn't, nothing of course is official, and nothing is ever official until it's official. There's no other way to say it. I have heard some of the same rumblings. I actually spoke with a close friend of mine who had talked about what they know in regards to starting the season. It sounds like it's becoming more of a possibility than it had. I think it was a really hard concept to grasp at first. Like, why would you bother? I think the NHL is more open to reconfiguring next year too. So it looks, it could be a situation where it potentially starts up in December, the 2021 season. And then you finish out the year here. I know they still will have the draft in June. That'll be online. I mean, every other league has proven to do that just fine. Shout out to the NWHL for such an amazing draft experience.
So cool.
How cool is that, Alexis? I mean, you tuned in, I'm sure, quite a bit.
Yeah. Yep. I followed along as much as I could. And it was such a unique idea. I mean, the thing is we've seen 3 drafts in the past 2 weeks here. We had the WNBA happen first, then we had the NFL, and then we had the NWHL. And each of them did it in slightly different ways, and they all did it very uniquely. And as someone, like going to school for broadcast journalism, watching this, I'm like, I know how hard this is to do, like given the best circumstances and all the right resources, like watching it, I'm like, wow, they really found creative ways to pull this off, to keep fans interested, to make it exciting, because this is one of the most exciting days for a professional athlete is the day you get drafted,
Yeah.
celebrating with your friends, celebrating with your family, getting your name out there, having people be introduced, some people learning about you for the first time, others being excited that you're joining their team. So it's a really special day, and under these circumstances, I can imagine it was hard for them to find a creative way to still make this day really special and exciting.
Mhm.
And I really thought the NWHL did a fantastic job. They had so many awesome guests announce the picks, other pro athletes, broadcasters, other journalists, just so many awesome people who help grow the game and are a part of the NWHL on a day in and day out basis. And it was just such a really cool, unique way to do it. And I saw a lot of engagement on Twitter with it, people being excited about it. And that's really awesome to see. So I'm really happy for them that they were able to pull that off in the way they did and got such a good response from people for that, because, you know, you do something new like that, you don't know if it's going to work. You know, you could have it all planned out and say, this is how we're going to do it, and then it just doesn't go the way that you expected. So the fact that those 3 leagues were able to pull off drafts given all these circumstances, I was very impressed with. I'm excited to see how the NHL does it on their end, because it'll be a challenge for sure. But so far, everyone's been able to make it exciting, so that's some good news.
Yeah, challenge to you, NHL, to keep up the
Yeah.
trend and to just kind of figure out what works best for
Mhm.
them, because like you said, that is a moment that those kids, because
Yeah.
they're kids, you know, especially in the NHL when you can get drafted so young, it's like
Mhm.
that's a moment they will never forget. So you want to make sure it's still special and they still get their moment, you know,
Yeah.
and still get to appreciate and enjoy that.
Mhm.
So we're going to take a quick break though. Before we do, shout out to our presenting sponsors, sodastick.com. They have a really sweet new Metrodome shirt. Alexis, do you remember the Metrodome? Yeah, kind of, like a little bit.
No. I've heard good things.
Wow, Fred. Wow, that's just
Wasn't the
insane.
Metrodome where the Mall of America is now? Is that true?
No, that's the Met
What?
Center.
Met Center. Well, see, listen, I'm
I mean,
24. What do you want from me?
I'm not even from Minnesota. I know this. What?
Fred has had his
Oh, boy.
mic on mute up until this moment, and then he just turns it on to rage.
Yeah.
That's my whole shtick. I just rage at Alexis. That's
Yeah,
it. That's
like,
it.
wait, what? Another
I was at-
shining moment here.
I was at the last Minnesota football game at the Metrodome when
Really?
Iowa took them to the watershed. I mean, just absolutely blew them out of the water. But I was there for that.
Yeah, because Gopher football used to play their games there too
Yeah.
for a bit before they had TCF. And
I covered Iowa football for 3 seasons.
boo.
I
As
know.
a Cyclone and a Gopher fan, like I hate Iowa more than anything. Like that who hates Iowa chant is like my jam. I'm
You
all in on
should,
that.
because Iowa did go to the BCS Bowl. And when was the last time you guys were at a really, really high ranking bowl?
Hey, back off, Fred.
Don't.
Go back on mute. I'm gonna just mute you
I
myself.
don't
Like,
remember. I don't
but
know.
anyway,
I'm from Missouri.
tangent. Sorry, Soda Stick. They
love
have
you,
these
Soda
really,
Stick.
we love you. They have these really cool shirts that are
They
the
are
Metrodome,
sick,
and
yeah.
then there's also the ones where I got blown out of the Metrodome because Alexis, as you may not know, there was the wind because it was a dome, and you'd like literally kind of get like blown out the doors as you left because it was just kind of the revolving thing. So cool shirts. Again, slapped on that Bardown Beauties code at checkout for free shipping, and check out the Bardown Beauts merch. Still some stuff available, always available. Look sharp all summer long, all quarantine long. And yeah, we'll be right back. And we're back. You guys probably recognize these faces for the people listening on our podcast. It's Wes Walz and Richard Park. Boys, how are ya?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining us. I mean, FSN has been replaying a lot of the classic games. Have you guys been tuning in, checking it out, reliving the old glory days?
Wes, you can start.
Yeah. Well, I don't imagine, Richard, I know you're out in California, Parksey. I don't imagine you don't get an FSN out there. But
Yeah.
it has been pretty cool being able to watch some of the classic games back. Not even just the Wild, the Twins World Championships in '87 and '91. I know everybody talks about those. I was a big baseball fan and like a baseball player growing up. So I'm enjoying the classics maybe more than most. The games in 2003 have been really exciting to watch, for a couple of reasons. One reason being I I really haven't sat down and watched the games back. It was the first time I really sat down and watched the games back from beginning to end. I mean, I watched the highlights just like everybody else. And then the other part that I thought was going to be really neat was to have my 13-year-old Shane. She just walked out. So she was like a baby when I retired, never really saw me play. And then my 10-year-old, I thought he would be excited about watching it. The first game they sat down, I think they both got halfway through the first period. They were already bored and they were on their way out the door to play with their friends. So,
Nice.
but no, it's pretty neat watching those games back for sure.
Yeah. What about
Yeah.
you, Richard? So as Wes said, you're out in California. I'm sure what FSN isn't running any replays out there for you, but have you had friends texting you saying, "Hey, I'm watching you. Check this out." Anything like that?
Well, believe it or not, we actually do get FSN out
Ooh,
here.
okay.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, it's part of that hockey package.
Oh.
And I did search for it, but it was blacked out for some reason. It doesn't come.
man.
So I didn't see it, but and like Wes, I have not seen the game in
wow.
full since that moment, but or since that day. But I did get a funny text from one of my friends who was watching it from his couch, and he texted me a screenshot and on his TV, and you know it obviously brings back a lot of great memories. But we looked so old. Like I don't know if it's because of the quality of the picture back then. Like watching a game on TV, even though I didn't watch it, but the quality compared, back in 03 to now is just it's night and day. So I was a little in shock. But to this day, whether I see a highlight or I hear the replay, it's instant, the feelings that come back. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that I haven't seen it or I didn't watch it, while they've been playing all those classic games. But I would imagine, it'd bring back a lot of good feelings inside, and who knows? I'd probably go and start training again and maybe make a comeback.
I have a feeling you wouldn't be too far away from.
Yeah, right.
I mean, when you guys do watch that, I mean, does it seem like it really was just yesterday and it doesn't feel like that much time has passed? I mean, 17 years, right? Like it doesn't feel like time has passed. Does it still feel as exciting and as amazing as it did in that moment live?
For me, whether it's professional or personal, every great moment in my life, the ones that come off the top of my head, starting with my wedding and then the birth of my children on a personal level, it does seem like it just happened yesterday, especially your kids, because you see them grow. And you realize that it didn't happen yesterday because they eventually get bigger than you are and smarter than you are. But and it's the same thing on a professional level. Like it does seem like it was just yesterday, because you can kind of go back to that moment and relive like all the senses that you felt. From the things that you heard, from the things that you felt, like with your hands and saw with your eyes and just everything. But there's the reminders when you see the clip and the quality of how long ago it actually was, right? So, but I don't know. It's probably the same with Wes. He's got a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
You know what? I mean, it does feel, it doesn't feel like 17 years ago. I mean, it feels like 10, 12 years. It doesn't like the extra 5 years. I don't know where they went in there, but the one thing that stood out to me watching the game, and I don't know for you, Parksey, but now that we're retired and, we played in the 2000s and the 90s a little bit, when we would go back and watch games that happened in the 80s, I would think to myself, man, that I cannot believe how much hooking and holding, and I can't believe how slow the players are. And that's no disrespect to the players because they paved the way for all of us. But watching the game in 03, the playoff game, the first playoff game that I watched, I couldn't believe the pace of the games, how fast they were. And it kind of threw me for a bit of a loop. I didn't expect the pace to be as fast as it was. I thought I'd watch the games back and I'd be like, oh, I can't believe I played in that era. But I got to be perfectly honest. I was pretty impressed by the pace of the games. throughout the playoffs. And if you think of the games that we watched here on FSN, they were games 5 or 6 and 7. So we were at the end of the series. I don't think the pace of game 7 was quite as fast as game 6, just because we had to pack up our bags and head back to Denver for game 7. But the pace of the game is one thing that really stood out to me. I didn't see it. I mean, obviously the players are faster today. There's no denying that. But I didn't think the gap was as big as I thought it was going to be honest.
I was going to say, do you think in your prime, could you keep up with the pace of the game today? I mean, because it's changed so much, and players are, Connor McDavid, holy cow, right? Like, do you think that you could keep up
I think we take Connor McDavid out of the equation.
Exactly.
He's a cheat code. I don't know, man.
Players in today's league would can't keep up with him, but
yeah.
No, I mean, I'm not gonna. I don't know.
I'll answer that because Wes is going to be modest here, and I'll answer it for Wes.
Yeah.
But one thing I do want to touch on, what Wes was talking about, the pace of the playoffs and whatnot. You know, I haven't seen the games, but just listening to him, this is now it's been 6+ years since I last played a game, a professional game, and I've never missed it at any moment as a player, except when I went to a live playoff game last year. I was working, but for some reason, just all that adrenaline, the motion and whatnot, it was the one time since I've retired that I actually missed playing. And I don't know if that holds true for Wes, but I would imagine, watching playoff hockey, even on TV, that's the only time those feelings come back where I miss it as a player, the hockey part. And then you're talking about the speed. I see a lot of hockey like Wes does, but I'll say this: you do have to take McDavid out of the equation. He's like he's Lightning McQueen on stage. It's incredible. But I think the average skater is faster, but and I'm not saying this because Wes. I'm looking at him. Wes, one of the best skaters I've ever played with. Not necessarily just, I'm not talking just speed from point A to point B in a straight line, but edge work and all these things that go into being a terrific skater, being cognizant of your edges of your skates and blades and everything. And Wes could skate. Wes would be in the upper echelon of skaters in today's NHL by far during his prime. I think even right now, if Wes was to go out on the ice, he could skate in the NHL, and that's God's honest. Yeah, he may
I wasn't
have to upgrade
say
his skates.
Hey, listen, I may have to spray paint the white things on my skates because the kids don't think that's that cool. But I think, Richard was an amazing skater as well too, and I think, those Wild teams in those early years, I don't think we got enough credit for how fast our teams really, really were and how quick they were. But, Parksey's been out of the game for 6 years. If Coach Evison wants to try to squeeze 5-6 minutes out of a fourth line, I think Parksey and I, with another winger, we could figure out a way to not get scored on and just give 5 or 6 minutes. I don't know if I can give much more than that, Parksey. I have to lock myself I think I'd have to lock myself in a sauna for about 3 months to get down my playing weight.
You could put Kaprizov on the line with you guys, right? And he can help carry some momentum.
Oh, maybe. No, too much pressure. Too much pressure.
Yeah.
Well, I got a question. You guys both said that, Wes, the first time you had watched a replay of the game from 2003 was when they replayed on FSN. Richard, you said you haven't watched it still. Is there a reason that you guys have not watched it in all this time? Is it to kind of preserve the excitement and the passion that went into that game and just kind of letting it lie where it was? Or did you just never get around to it and this was the first opportunity you had to rewatch it? Because I think that's pretty interesting. That's such a big part of your guys' lives and careers. Hasn't resurfaced watching it until now.
I guess I'm just lazy. I never really too busy. I just after retired, just too busy chasing kids around and busy with life. Never really gave it a whole lot of thought. And I figured at some point I'm going to end up watching maybe those games before. I never really went on YouTube or anywhere to see if you could actually find the games or not. I'm sure you can find them somewhere. And I know Parksey hasn't had a chance to watch it. We'll send him a couple VHS tapes.
There you go.
So he can watch them. But I don't know. You know, I actually thought a little bit more about it once the games were being played. Like, why haven't I watched these games back? I don't really have a decent answer for you. Um, yeah, I really just don't have a decent answer for you. The other thing I was going to mention too about the speed of the game is, so FSN showed the very first home Wild game against Philadelphia. Yep. We tied 3-3. And then they also showed, I think a couple months later, we played Dallas and beat them. We beat them 6-0. And that was in 2000. It was amazing how the pace of the games from those regular season games to 2 years later to the playoffs, that was a huge difference for me. Just even in those 2 years. And I don't know if that was mostly because of regular season play and playoff play, but I couldn't agree more with Richard. And I feel exactly the same way. I don't miss training. I don't miss eating chicken, fish, and drinking water for 9-10 years straight. I don't miss any of that. But I do miss it, man, when the playoffs roll around. Just the intensity around the buildings, around the building, the excitement, the build-up is just, it's so immense. And now we're not in the locker room, so we can actually, you know, Richard said he was in the building. You can actually feel it everywhere in the building. It's amazing, and we feel it in the locker rooms as well when we're walking out the chute. It's very, very real, and it's really hard to duplicate.
Yeah, you know, much like what Walzy said about not having, you know, not only the opportunity to watch the game, I think you get, you know, when that happened, you know, you're so entrenched in the moment that you don't really go back and kind of like, you know, you don't go back and get comfortable with what you guys, you know, with what we just had accomplished. You're always striving to be better and do more and accomplish more. So I think during that time, you're really not living in the past. And then, you know, once hockey ends, you do get busy, like with, you know, your kids and your family and then whatnot. And then now, you know, Walzy mentioned VHS. Now no one has a VHS player, so you can't watch it. and that's, you know, that's always challenging. But yeah, you know, I don't know. I guess everybody's kind of wired differently, but you know, I don't really, personally, I don't really live in the past or kind of, you know, hang on to things that, you know, happened years ago. You know, I live for, I mean, geez, we all have so much time on our hands now, but you know, you just try and live in the moment and look forward to tomorrow. So, yeah,
maybe that's why when we played for the Wild Parksey, whenever we'd get beat so bad, we were so good at parking stuff and putting things behind us. Maybe that carried on into our life after hockey.
You know, you guys,
we got beat a lot.
I was gonna say it was from practice. We had good practice.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you guys both mentioned the playoffs and that feeling and just the electricity. Given the situation now and what the NHL on suspension, if they were to come back and there are no fans, how difficult would that be to capture some of that excitement with an empty building and to play such a meaningful game without some of that momentum that you're used to having in your home at your home rink? Walzy, you want to start?
Parksey.
You know, I'll be honest with you. I think before that was to, you know, even if it's gonna happen, I think there'd be a little bit of resentment, or not resentment. I think there'd be a little bit of resistance from the players' perspective, from their point of view. You know, I think owners and management, it's a completely different conversation. But from the players' perspective, I think there'd be a little bit of resistance at first because they'd be questioning, you know, the rationale why, especially if a team like, let's just say Detroit and LA has to play. They certainly would be like, we're not making the playoffs. They don't see any purpose, or what's the point? Mm-hmm. But, you know, for the rest of the teams, I think once they actually play the game, they're in the moment, they're on the ice, and they go into the corner battling for a puck. You know, I think it goes out the window. Because that's what happens when you play. When you're on the ice and there's 20,000, you know, fans screaming in the building, do you notice and are you aware of it? For sure, but you know, that's not the driving force. You know, when you're going down on the opposing net, you want to score a goal. When you're coming back to your own net, you want to defend, you want to prevent a goal. So I think the competitive nature of all the players would just come to the surface and they'd be able to play. I think before the game and after the game, it'd be tough, but I think once they're in the moment, they all have a lot of pride. They're very competitive. I don't think it would be an issue.
Yeah, when and if we get back playing hockey, that is one thing that's going to be really interesting. Whether we get into the 4 or 5 hub situation, whether or not we get to finish the regular season or not. If we do get a chance to finish the regular season, which the Minnesota Wild obviously hope where they're sitting in the standings, but I just think there's going to be some weird hockey in those last 10, 12 games or however many they played it to determine who makes the playoffs. I mean, just when you're training during the summer and you're getting ready for a hockey season, there's so much excitement. You train hard, you take care of yourself, you do everything. I don't know the teams that are out of the playoffs, it's going to be so weird for them to have to come back and play 10 or 12 games, especially for the guys that have been around a little bit, to come back and play 10, 12 games in meaningful games that are going to determine who is and who's not going to make who's going to make the playoffs. I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars for well, maybe not quite as many now because there won't be as fans in the stands, but I think the hockey is going to be a little bit weird, especially for those teams with not having fans in the stands. The playoff atmosphere, I think, and when you're playing in the playoffs, you recognize it's going to be weird for the players when they come out to shoot for warm up. They're going to be skating around, warming up, no one around. It's going to feel really weird when they come out to shoot for the start of the game. The music's going to be blaring and they're going to hear the music and that's it. I don't know if they're going to pipe in music or they're going to have cardboard cutouts in the seats. That's going to happen or not, but it is going to feel really weird. But I do agree with Parksey 100%. As soon as in the playoff game, and even when we played playoff games, you don't really remember what's going on in the fans. You remember the atmosphere after you score a goal. You remember looking around the stands and feeling that. That's going to be really weird. But I do agree with Richard. Once the puck drops, there's going to be guys that are playing for the Stanley Cup. It's going to be fun to watch, and the pace of the games are going to be unbelievable. It is going to be a little bit weird after goals and things like that, but I don't think the fans at home guys are going to get cheated from quality of play when we get in the playoffs.
I know I told my dad when we were watching game 6 of the Colorado series and you guys in 2003, I was telling my dad, I said, listen to those fans. I mean, the whole game, the fans were screaming, they're on their feet, they're cheering, they're booing. And I said, I think that was the first time it really hit me. I was like, how weird would it be to have a playoff game with no fans? Like we've been talking about it, we've been thinking about it, but listening to them in that game, I was like, my God, that atmosphere is absolutely wild, no pun intended. And I just kept thinking, how crazy would it be to not have fans or see fans or hear fans at a playoff game, because that's part of what makes the playoff so exciting for both the fans and the players.
For sure. And if we had no fans in the building in game 6 against Colorado, I can promise you all of us players would have been chasing Richard Park down the side of the ice as fast as we were, whether the crowd was going crazy or not, to go tackle him. But I agree, Alexis, it is going to feel weird, no question about it. But as I mentioned before, I think just the juices of the players once they get going and what's at stake is Stanley Cup. I think the hockey is going to be great.
Speaking of fans, I mean, Minnesotans, as you guys clearly know, are just so passionate about hockey, right? And they were so hungry for a professional team, and you guys helped give them what they wanted to see, a successful season too, with the reaching Western Conference Finals. How quickly did you guys realize how important Minnesotans feel about hockey and how much it means to them in this game? Was it like instantaneous as soon as you guys were out there on the ice? Did you feel that passion right away? Richard, what did you think?
Well, as a kid, I'd been to Minnesota several times, so I was exposed a little bit to the culture. And growing up, being part of USA Hockey, there'd always be an abundance of players from Minnesota, and I was fortunate enough to forge friendships with several of them, and to this day, I still maintain some of those relationships. And so I always knew it was hockey was very prominent in the culture in the state of Minnesota, but definitely until I went and moved and was entrenched, within the community and not only on the ice but off the ice, I didn't really know, the magnitude of the game of hockey and what it meant to the people from the state. And I'm fortunate enough where I do live in LA, but I'm fortunate enough where I get back to Minnesota and I still work for the club. So it's for me it's special. It's I lived in Canada for 6 years, and it certainly compares to Canada as far as I'm referring to the game of hockey, as far as the importance and the kindness of the people there, and how they just are. They're really, really down to earth, good people without the game of hockey. And you put hockey into the equation, and they're very passionate. Obviously, you guys all know. And I don't know if there's a place in the U.S. and Wes and I have traveled the world and seen a lot of places, and I don't know if there's a place in the world like Minnesota, in the U.S. I mean, where hockey and where you have the combination of the people and the hockey and what that produces. I always say, I was one contract away from making Minnesota, my permanent home, and it's that special of a place in my heart. And I was lucky enough to have, had a number of good years there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was basically the first game of this season at home. I mean, coming out for warm up against the Flyers, I'll never forget it. We had quite a few fans around our practice facility out at Parade Ice Gardens. That's where we had our tryouts and stuff like that. We had some exhibition games. I can't remember it. The first year, I can't remember if we were up in Grand Forks. I don't remember playing. Maybe we played a game or two in the XL Energy Center. I just don't remember the atmosphere being like that in the preseason games, but I still remember the atmosphere in the building for that first home game. And that's when it kind of hit me. I'm like, man, this is a big deal. And then as the season went on, I mean, it feels like Canada. I mean, I grew up there. I'm born and raised. I mean, it feels like Canada. People care about the game. They care about whether you're winning and losing. And we knew that they were along for the ride with us. I mean, those first couple years were pretty tough. I mean, we won quite a few games for expansion teams, but there were some nights we got beat pretty bad. And, we never got booed off the ice ever. I think the fans were always happy with the effort we put forward. They're very knowledgeable, and they recognize that, a lot of times we were playing with a $20, $25 million payroll, playing against teams that $60, $70, $80 million payrolls. It was always difficult, but it didn't take long to recognize how much the sport meant to the folks in Minnesota.
Well, you guys, talked about the fans, and that's a big reason why I think that 2003 playoff run was so exciting, was because fans were bitter and angry that the North Stars were taken away from them. They wanted something to be excited about as far as professional hockey goes in Minnesota. It was the first time they saw something like that from the Wild, and I think it was a bit unexpected at the same time, not just for Minnesota fans, but for the entire NHL to see what you guys did that year. What was it that made that season, and specifically that postseason, really click for you guys through those first two rounds? Because you guys were down and out for the count several times in that postseason, and the heart just wouldn't stop beating. You guys found a way to win more than once in times where people had counted you out. So what was it that really made that team click for you guys?
Well, I don't know if you remember this or not, Parksey, but we had our last game of the season that year. We knew we were going to make the playoffs. We won our last game. I believe it was an afternoon game. We played Columbus. We won our game, and we all went out, a bunch of us. And I know, Richard, you and Devin, your wife, were there out for dinner. I think we went to the St. Paul Hotel across the street.
Yeah.
And I remember, Jimmy Dowd was there, and Laxo was there, and some other guys. And I remember talking about the only team that we didn't want to play going into the playoffs was Colorado. That was the only team. I would play Vancouver. There were a couple other. I think maybe the Oilers were in the mix. I can't really remember. Or actually the Dallas Stars probably. The only team we didn't want to play was Colorado. And the only way we could play Colorado in the first round of the playoffs was if Vancouver lost against the Los Angeles Kings, who were the worst team in the league, and Vancouver had one of the best records at home in the NHL, and they lost 2-0 at home that night.
Of course.
we of course they did, and we hooked the Colorado Avalanche. So yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, so we were playing Colorado. We weren't overly excited about them. I remember. I mean, I could go on, and this could be a 2-hour podcast. But I mean, I still remember Mike Ramsey bringing the easel, blackboard or whiteboard or whatever into the locker room and putting everyone's names, putting Sakic, Forsberg, Tanguay, Hayduk, all these names, and then putting the lines together underneath or above them, and we had to walk by it every day for 3-4 days. And the longer we walked by it, the more we thought, you know what, we can beat these guys. We definitely can beat these guys. We had a lot of meetings about how good we were. We knew we didn't talk a whole lot about it, but we knew we were better than anybody gave us credit for. And if you look at some of those teams, like you look at Pascal Dupuis going on to be a 30-40 goal scorer, win 2 Stanley Cups, Willie Mitchell going on to win a couple cups, Nick Schultz played 1,000 games. We had a lot of good players, and we were fast, and we knew one thing that we talked about was about staying out of the penalty box. That had to happen, and we needed to play really, really fast. And Marion and Parksey and Laxo and Pascal Dupuis could fly. I just mentioned 5 or 6 guys that were faster probably than any player they had on their team. I just mentioned 5 guys that were faster than Forsberg, faster than Sakic. So yes, they were all-stars. They're going to be Hall of Fame players. They probably have more skill. They had more skill than us. But we were confident enough in our locker room that we were going to be able to compete with them. Did we think we were going to win the series? We didn't know. I mean, how can you're playing the Colorado Avalanche, you're standing on the blue line at the Pepsi Center, you're looking across, you're seeing all the Hall of Famers, and you're wondering and you're nervous, are we going to get blown out? No one's really given us a chance to even really win a game. And our locker room, we had enough talent to be able to keep the game close. If our power play could be good, we got some bounces along the way, and we really competed hard. We really did think that we had a chance to compete with this team. And I think, and I can't speak for Richard, but in the Colorado series, I think going in there in game 1 and beating them in their building 4-2 and beating them, I'm not going to say we dominated them because that would be silly, but we didn't have our goaltender steal the game for us. We went in there and we beat them 4-2 straight up. And I think that sent a message to everybody in our locker room. It sent a message to Colorado. It sent a message to the people around the league that we were maybe a little bit better than people were giving us credit for. And I think that also woke up the Colorado Avalanche too, and they played much better in game 2, 3, and 4, as you know.
Yeah.
What are your feelings about Parksey?
Well, just to add to what Walzy had mentioned at the beginning, I do remember that night at the St. Paul Hotel. And one thing I think Wes forgot to mention, I don't know if you remember, but once we did find out that we were playing Colorado, Wes and I, we met in the restroom just by chance. And I'll never forget the look that he gave me, and I must have reciprocated, but it was one of fear. I mean, because like Wes had mentioned, it was the one team we didn't want to play because they had, arguably some of the best stars in our game at that time. And not to mention, one of the, if not the greatest goalie of all time. So, I mean, they were locked and loaded and like Wes had mentioned about their lineup being on the whiteboard and kind of passing by. And then, I think that just kind of summarized and summed up everything, for our team that year. And in kind of, even in conjunction with what Wes had talked about, like Minnesota being like Canada. I think in Canada, and Minnesota fans are very knowledgeable at the game. In Canada, they tend to critique, where in Minnesota, they tend to support. So we always had that support. And, our group in that room that year, led by our coaching staff, obviously, was, we're always kind of, like if you were kind of to imagine the regular season being just a series of tests, we're always given these tests, right, to play these games. And we were given the study sheet by the coaching staff, and more times than not, we had a great year. So we would pass, we would win some games, and we would start believing in ourselves and what we were doing, and believing in each other. And we had a special group that certainly didn't play for the guy that they stared at in the mirror every day. They played for that guy next to them. They made sure that they were prepared and they did their part and to bring something to that table. And all these things just kind of added to some great moments in that playoff series, starting with Colorado, going to Vancouver, and then we met our match in the third round. Whether you could maybe never see a performance by a goaltender like you saw by Jaguar, and I think that was kind of proven by the fact that he won the Conn Smythe that year on a losing team, if you guys recall. So all these things kind of just added and cultivated to us having some great moments. And like Wes said, I don't think we got enough credit. I still think people kind of overlook what we were able to accomplish that year. And Wes mentioned several names that went on to have great careers. We did have good players. I mean, it was certainly there was a lot of great things to come about it. It's hard to pinpoint one thing. I don't think anything is by coincidence or accident that year. I think everything was meant to happen, and I think the players and the coaching staff worked, for everything that we were able to accomplish.
I mean, I credit that team and that season really with exciting me in hockey. I was still pretty young. My parents were always big hockey fans, and I was starting to get into the game a little bit more. I think I was in middle school. And I just remember watching the whole playoff series and being just so happy and so excited. I'm like, I love hockey. This is great. This is the best thing I've ever seen. And now I turned it into a career, So, I mean, it was that team. It was just, there was something special about you guys. It was just really, it was fun to watch. I mean, even in the tough times and even the losses.
It's interesting that you say that, Jesse, because, this playoff run we were on was pretty remarkable what we were doing. And losing to Anaheim was devastating. I mean, it really, really was. And I know we got swept in 4 games. But I think people will look at the scores of those games and go, well, they got swept 4 straight. The Cinderella story came to an end or whatever. But we played really good in that Anaheim series.
Yeah.
We only scored 2 or 3 goals. And everyone knows how game 1 was. I mean, I think the shots were 44-25. We outshot them. Probably should have scored 4 or 5 goals that game. But we outshot Anaheim in 3 of those 4 games. And there were some games that I thought we deserved a better fate, and it just didn't happen for us. But the one thing that kind of jumped out to me after the season was over and we kind of got out in the public, and you're walking around the grocery store, you're walking wherever, out on the streets or whatever, I had no clue what was going on outside the building. I mean, Parksey and the players, we get to the rink at 4:00 in the afternoon, 3:30. We don't see the craziness, the parties before the games and all that. We're so full on our jobs and just trying to compete and give ourselves a chance to win a game. And then after the games, you come up the tunnel, you're out the back door. You don't really see a lot of everything going on. And I just remember, it was one of the other things that really stood out to me about 03. I still remember not being able to go anywhere without anyone giving you a hug. And thank you so much. A lot like what you just said, Jesse, and actually what you were saying to me actually just brought back some of those memories, because I completely forgot about that till you mentioned it. And that was one of the things that stood out to me as a player that went through that. We had no clue. I mean, we had an idea. We knew it was big, but we didn't realize how big it was.
My mom still harbors a severe hatred for Anaheim because of that season as well. Like, she's just hated them for a very, very long time. Probably more than Dallas, I would think. I would venture to guess. But
that save Jaguar made on Marion, like with 5 minutes left in the game, where, I mean, we still have to watch that. I mean, ESPN, before the playoffs, ESPN and when you watch Hockey Night in Canada highlights, they have to always show that one save that he made Jaguar. And I just often think about what would have happened if we would have won game 1, and having home ice in that series, how the whole thing would have played out.
I think it's interesting. You guys talked about how, obviously what a disappointing loss in the conference finals to the Ducks after some really, really emotional series before that. And I think it says a lot about Minnesota fans and Minnesota hockey fans specifically, in the sense that you look at that 2003 season and you could look at it in one sense and say, well, who cares? They lost in the conference finals and it doesn't matter what they did in rounds 1 and 2. But when fans look at that season, all they think about is the excitement of round 1, the excitement excitement of round 2. You don't really hear too many people say, well, it sucks they lost in the conference finals. Everyone's just excited about the passion that those first 2 series brought, and the excitement about hockey in Minnesota that hadn't been felt in a while since the North Stars had left. So I think it just says a lot about fans and the way they approach hockey here. Richard, you made a good comment about how Canadian fans critique and Minnesota fans support. I think if this would have happened in Canada, fans would have just been talking about the conference finals loss. But here in Minnesota, they're happy just to see some kind of excitement and some kind of win. And we're here 17 years later still talking about how exciting that was for Minnesotans.
You know, it certainly helped, you know, even though the North Stars and hockey, you know, the North Stars were there in hockey so big in Minnesota, I think it accelerated and jump-started an expansion team, you know, to a certain degree. And I think it kind of accelerated the process as far as, you know, maybe taking away a little bit of the harsh feelings towards the North Stars leaving, you know, and bringing some renowned excitement for kind of an unknown, it was an unknown franchise, right? I mean, like the Minnesota Wild, I mean, you know, you've had the North Stars, you've had the Gophers there, you've had high school hockey, you've had a number of things there forever. So I think we were just lucky enough as players and as an organization that, you know, everyone that was part of that organization, just to be part of something that, you know, hopefully is going to be there for a very long time, and, you know, have playoff runs that go into the Stanley Cup finals and win championships, and, you know, and we'll be able to look back and, you know, hopefully say we were part of that, you know, that great special franchise, you know, known as the Minnesota Wild.
I think you both are so still revered and loved and adored here in Minnesota, right? I mean, you guys come back. Wes, you're around quite a bit, but I know Richard, I'm sure once you come back, people still probably are like, it's Richard Park. Remember Richard Park? He scored that goal back in overtime. Like, you know, I think there's still so much excitement around both of you guys. So it's fun to see.
Not only did Richard score the overtime winner, I think he set up the winner in set up the tying goal in Game 7 too. So we had a lot of guys that would step up in big games and make big plays, and Richard was definitely one of those guys. The other thing that Alexis, you mentioned you know, the fans were just happy we got there. Things are a little bit different today than they were. There was not the pressure in our locker room to have to win that the players in the locker room have today. I mean, Mr. Craig Leopold, when he came in and bought the team, he's been close to the salary cap. He's not taking all his money that out of the fans are bringing in and putting it in the bank. I mean, he's pouring it back into the product, and that's why one of the reasons I think Craig is an awesome owner. He wants to win. He's spending the money. I mean, we had a $25 million payroll back then. There was no pressure on us to win, and I think that helped our guys in the locker room just feel at ease with whatever happened. We were comfortable just playing hard. The only thing that we ever talked about in our locker room with our coaches was just, let's make sure that we're the hardest working team on the ice, and we'll live with the results. That was it. It wasn't really much more confusing than that. You know, sure, we talked about X's and O's and guys that we have to focus on. Matchups were a huge thing with Jacques Lemaire back then, getting guys on and off the ice. We were so good at it, our bench. Guys were so prepared for how to change and what Jacques wanted to do. Guys were always ready. We got the right guys on and off the ice. That's one thing that we probably haven't talked a whole lot about is Jacques and how much of an impact he had in our locker room, and knowing that we had an advantage behind the bench with having a guy that had been around the block, and we had a lot of confidence in him to make sure that we had the right guys on the ice just to give ourselves the best chance. But no question about it, the pressure in the locker room today for the Minnesota Wild, I'm not sure the fans would be. Well, we've lived it, Alexis. We know what it's like when the Wild lose in the first round. Here we go again. So things have changed in the last 10, 12, 13, 14 years.
Well, it's interesting because we've talked about it a few times here, but this is an interesting dynamic, I think, in sports. So I'm curious what you guys think about it. Do you think athletes and teams play harder when there's lower expectations for them or higher? Because I think there's something to be said about when you have low expectations, there's a little bit less pressure, but you want to obviously exceed that and prove people wrong. But when there's high expectations, you don't want to fall short of that and make people say, oh, we were wrong about them. They're not as good as we thought. And as you said in that 2003 season, there was a lot of people who said they're not going to do anything. It doesn't matter if they make the playoffs, they're not going to win a game or a series. do you think that made you guys play differently or harder, knowing that there was a lot of people, discounting you and saying that you would do well?
Well, I think just to add on to what Walzy was saying about the pressures that's inside the Minnesota Wild dressing room today is, I think it's not just today that the game's changed, that the kids have changed that are in that locker room. The world's changed. I learned quite a bit through my son, and I'm sure Walzy can attest to this, that there's a lot of pressure on these kids starting at a young age, and they're not even, they're in youth hockey. I think sometimes a lot of that, the passion that you have for the game is not even given the opportunity to kind of come to the forefront, because you're just expected at an early age to perform, which is, that's hard for anybody, let alone a young kid. But the game's going to have these players in it, because that's where that's where they come from. And to as far as our team's concerned, outside expectations internally, I don't think ever kind of affected us, like what the media, what the fans expected from us. I think everybody was at the best, was playing in the best league in the world for a reason, because they had high expectations for themselves. And I can assure you that if you went from top to bottom in our locker room back in 2003, every guy demanded the most out of themselves. So as far as expectations are concerned, I mean, they're high. They're just as high as the Colorado Avalanche locker room, because those guys are the same thing. So as far as the pressure externally, maybe it is harder to perform when they're high, because if you don't reach them, there's gonna be disappointment, and for us, just because the expectations weren't maybe as high from a media perspective, if we had lost that round, we would have been just as disappointed. It doesn't relieve any of that disappointment. So sure. I don't really buy into it. I do buy into things that they're like pressure, like people respond to pressure differently. That's for me, that's a conversation to be had. But as far as expectations, as an athlete, if you don't have high expectations for yourself, you're not gonna get very high. And if you do get high, you're not gonna be able to sustain yourself at that level. And
that's your competitors, right?
That's my position on it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Competitors. Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure, Walzy, you probably feel close to the same way as what he explained.
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned this earlier, we talk more about the Colorado series than we do Vancouver, just because I think everyone remembers that for whatever reason. But we knew we were good. I mean, we knew that we were a good team, and we had expectations. We wanted to win. I mean, I wish people could have been in the locker room after we lost to Anaheim. I mean, it wasn't like there wasn't a whole lot of celebrating going on. I mean, we knew how close we were to winning a Stanley Cup. We were 8 wins away. We got halfway there. We were down to 4 teams, especially the way game one, unfolded. It was just so unfortunate. We expected to win. We were good enough, and we knew going into every series that with Manny and Dwayne Rolison, we had 2 great goalies. And I know Patrick Waugh is a Hall of Famer, and he's an unbelievable goalie, but we knew going into that series that we had better the goalies, even with Patrick Waugh and where he was in his career at the end of his career. Cloutier, the goalie in Vancouver, we had the better goalie there, and unfortunately, Jaguar was just played lights out, and it was just so disappointing to get that far and then run into a wall like that. And then the other thing that really pissed me off was when I started hearing about how like his equipment, like he was wearing this extra big equipment and things on the outside. He was building blocks on the outside of his bleachers, and when he'd go down in the butterfly position, his shoulders would pop up to the roof like this. So when I heard some of that stuff after the series was over, I got a little pissed off. I'm not gonna lie, but Anyway, I agree with Richard.
Are you still getting heated right now? Are you still like, fired up?
I am. It still bothers me to this day, but especially when you get that close to winning a Stanley Cup, it's everyone's goal, and we got pretty close.
Yeah. Well, again, I still think what you guys achieved is tremendous. It's still the furthest that any team has ever made it for the Minnesota Wild. So you'll always have that. Before we let you guys,
let's hope this changes soon. And I got a feeling at some point in the next 5 years, I think it's going to happen.
I like that. Put that down.
So we don't have to talk about 03 anymore. Let's talk about some runs out of Minnesota Wild teams now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, before we let you guys go, we wanted to do some fun trivia from 2003 and that team and see how much you guys remember of your teammates. We'll start. Okay. Yeah, right. I know. I did tell you because I didn't want you to be prepared. I didn't want you studying. How many times did you guys put up more than 3 goals that season? Regular season and postseason.
Well, this has got to be like Price is Right, closest to, right?
Okay, yeah, right. Yep, we'll go closest to.
Okay, hey, I'm older than you, Parks. You got to go first.
Okay, so let's see. We played. What did we play that year? 100 games.
82 and 18. 100 games, right on the button.
So I'll go with. I'll say we scored. How many goals was it?
3.
More than 3.
More than 3.
So four or more.
Okay. I'll say 35%.
Okay.
I could say 34%. Did you say 35?
Yeah.
I'm going to say 21%.
I don't do math, but you guys did it 19 times. So whatever that percentage is. But yeah, 19 times you guys put up 4 or more goals.
That's 19%. That's 100 games.
Yep.
The only reason I know that is because I've sharpened up my math skills here with the kids at home.
Yeah, doing the social distance learning, helping out in math class. Nice.
No, the only reason Wes knows that is because he's the only guy you'll ever meet that's happier keeping a puck out of his net than scoring one.
Okay, let's talk about one of the superstars on the team that year, Marian Gaborik. How many points did he have in that season?
Marian had 65 points that year.
All goes. Oh, you hit it again? What do you study this stuff? I'm gonna say Marian had. What'd you say? 65. I want to say 74, but I'll say he had 68 points.
65 on the dot. Well done, Wes.
30 goals, right?
His kids are behind the computer right now.
Did he hack into our script?
My hands are right here.
Who led the team in plus minus that year? And it was plus 17. He actually led the team in.
Philip Kuba.
It's a good one.
But just for the game's sake, I'm going to say, I would say Coobs first. I would say Willie Mitchell second.
You guys are both incorrect.
Oh, Schultz.
Pascal Dupuis.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, he had plus 17 that year.
Coop is probably who I would have guessed too, though.
I would have, right. Those are valid guess. I had to quick double check. I'm like, it wasn't him, was it? But.
Okay.
All right. I'm assuming you guys will probably know the answer to this one. Who had more penalty minutes between the two of you in that season? And do you remember how many penalty minutes each of you had?
Jeez. I know if you added them both, they'd be under 100 for sure.
That's true.
That is true. Yes.
But I'm going to say Wes because Wes has more anger.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Wes had 48.
Okay. Wes, what do you think?
No, Wes was disciplined. I'll say Wes with 32.
32, okay.
37.
How much?
Wes 37.
All right.
Sure
Walzy,
number.
you had 63 penalty minutes that seaon.
I told you he's got anger issues, this guy.
Richard, you came in at whopping 16 penalty minutes.
Hey, I was right. Not even 100 if you added the 2.
Yep. Yep.
If you would have pulled your weight there, we might have got to 100.
That's a good point. This is true. I'll take responsibility on that.
How about who wore number 55? That's an easy one.
Yeah.
Yep. Nick Schultz.
Nicky. Yeah.
All right. This one will be a funny one because I'm interested to see what you guys think about this. How old do you think both Jesse and I were in 2003 during those playoff series?
Oh, jeez.
We will not be offended.
We won't be offended.
No ageism.
Were you guys the same age?
Nope.
No?
I will say you were
Loaded
8 years
question.
old.
Be careful, loaded question. Jesse, you already mentioned you were, I think
I
you said
kind
you
of,
were
and
in
I was
grade-
wrong. I was even a little bit older, I think.
Okay, I'm going to say Jesse, 03. I got to do the math now.
95 birth year, and that'll put things easy, make things easier for you. Isaac.
I'm going to say
95.
11. Jesse, you were 11. Alexis, you were
So 90,
13. 13?
90, 92 and a 90? 92
So-
and 90 birth?
So Jesse's older than me. I was
Ah.
7 at the time of the 2003 playoff
Hey,
series.
That's what I'm
Jesse,
saying. I got it backwards.
Jesse, how old were you?
I was 16.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm 87, but thank you.
Okay.
I'm
I'm
I
95.
can rock a 95 birth year. I'll take that.
In the
That
90s,
sounds
baby.
good.
I thought you were twins, so I just said 95.
There we go. We can be twins.
Yeah. What do you think the top song in 2003 was?
It's a rap song. I'll give you that.
Oh, Eminem.
Nope.
That's a good guess, though.
Oh, 2003 top
Yep.
song, like
Wes doesn't do rap. He's all country.
but I've kind of I can get into rap from time to time. I mean, I would have guessed Eminem too. They were kind of pretty big. He was
Mhm.
pretty big then. Oh,
Ja Rule.
Nope.
I have no clue. I got to be honest. None.
50 Cent into club.
50 Cent.
50 Cent.
Uh,
That wasn't playing in the locker room for you guys?
Bottle full of bub. Hey, I can't believe that I missed that because I still remember Cliff Ronning in the locker room after we won in Game 7, dancing to that song like he was 12 years old. We had it cranked in the locker room before the media come in. I'm so disappointed in myself right now.
That's amazing. That's an amazing memory. I'm picturing that, and that's hilarious.
50 Cent, yeah.
Oh, man.
Who had the biggest superstition on the team?
Oh,
I mean, goalies
that's
aren't easy, but yeah.
Oh.
who was it?
Our goalies.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Manny. For me, Manny. I know Richard's going to say me, but
No, believe it or not, for me, it's Cliff.
Cliff.
Cliff
Oh,
Ronning.
yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. Cliff.
What was it?
I'll never, Cliff, I love the guy to death, but I'll never, ever forget. I don't know, Walzy, if you remember this. We were pulling into Washington. And aside from all the tape and the scale, all that stuff, he was like on a 10+ game point streak or something. He was on a point streak. And we pulled up to the rink. We're pulling up to the rink in the bus, and he pulls out a suit. So he got on the bus with one suit, pulls another suit out of this backpack that's like wrinkled, and they didn't have wrinkle-free back then. And he puts it on. I'm like, what is that? And they had these gold buttons, and he's like, when you're on a point streak, you don't change any. That is gross. And I don't even know if he changed underwear or socks or what, but all I remember is the suit, and I had to look away and be like, I do not want to get to that point. I'll take
That
the point
really-
streak.
That doesn't shock me with Cliffy. Another guy that could be sneaky, Parksey. And I spent more time around the locker room before games and stuff, but I heard stories about Jason Marshall. Marshy, he'd have a few games, like street hockey games out by himself in the halls with no one around. I heard some of his games were epic. I just remember Tony DaCosta asking me one time, that's our equipment guy.
Yep.
I remember him asking me, have you ever seen Marshy before a game? And I'm like, no, I haven't. So did you ever hear that about Marshy?
No, it'd be funny though.
He'd be the kind of guy that you could figure that would play a few games out in the hall by himself. We did have quite a few. Now that I'm thinking about it, I was pretty superstitious back then.
Pretty. That's an understatement.
Yeah. Manny was.
What were some of the tendencies, or what did you have to do? Like, was it the taping, the stick? I mean, every little thing.
Different socks. The one superstition that we had was, so when I played in Switzerland before I played with the Wild, we won a championship the one year, and the one playoff run we went on. One of my kids, I can't remember which one, colored a rock for me. You know how you go bike the paths right now, and you see those little rocks on the side. Well, my kids kind of made a rock for me. We called it a lucky rock, and we went on to win the championship. And then when I came back for the Wild, it didn't start right away, but then I remember one of my kids, we'd lost a bunch of games, and I remember one of my kids, maybe it was my first year, second year, say, Dad, I got to make you another lucky rock. And he made me a rock, and I put it in my stall, and we started winning games. So that lucky rock kind of thing stuck with me. And through my career in Minnesota, and actually even in Switzerland. And every game that we played in the playoffs, Mario Tremblay had Wes's lucky rock in his pocket for the whole game. He always handed it to me after every game. So
that's awesome.
Where's that rock now?
Yeah.
I have it. I still have it. It's at my, it's in Calgary, my mom and dad's place, where all my old trophies and stuff. It's still sitting beside all my old trophies and stuff.
That's
you gotta hand that down. You have to hand that down.
Yeah. That one can stay in the trophy box. That one meant a lot to me. That was a good one.
Yeah.
I love it. And then final thing before we let you guys go, we got Bruno next week. He couldn't make it today, but we are chatting with him. What, any secrets, anything that we can chirp him about, or anything that you guys want to say that we can bring up with him next week?
Well, whatever I don't think about right now, I'll be sure to text you.
Yeah, perfect.
He's coming on next week?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
This same day, time? Friday at 2?
Yep. You guys want to come back? We can get you back in. You'll just jump in and chirp him that way. That's always, we're free for that.
Walzy can give him a go.
Just let Bruno do his own thing. He needs the camera to himself. He's one of those.
I love it. That's fair. Oh, well, you guys are the best. We really, really appreciate you hopping on and taking a trip down memory lane with us. We'll be sure to touch base again eventually down the road here.
That's always nice. Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for having us, guys. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll be right back. And we're back. Thanks again to Walzy and Parksey. That was so much fun. And again, the 16-year-old in me is like, oh, that was so cool. I have a thing for past teams, right?
It's the nostalgia.
It totally is. It's just really cool. And they were great. It was super fun. So thank you to both of them.
Yeah, we're lucky to be around Wes at Wild Games, working alongside him and stuff. And he's a great guy, and it's really awesome to reconnect with Richard as well, being that he's at Wild Games from time to time for his job, but he's not there all the time. So it was nice to see him again and have him hop on the podcast. So thank you to them for joining us and bringing something fun to talk about in this time of all this crappy stuff. So
right,
that was
and
really fun.
Everyone remembers that because it was the last time the Wild really did something, right? It was so exciting. And like you said, they weren't expected to. I mean, they were still a young expansion team. It was just, and they didn't have, they had Marian Gabrick, but again, still no real superstars, It wasn't a full like Colorado Avalanche was. So a lot of fun. So thank you again to both of them. And now it's time for everyone's favorite segment. Maybe it's just my favorite segment, but it's good. Here's Dear Diary with Alexis.
The first goal we scored was one of those that only old men can score. When I say old men, I mean Andrew Brunette. It was a side of the net shot that went off the goalie's back and into the net. It takes old men skills to score a goal like that. It really does. Even Koivu probably couldn't have scored that goal.
And that's Dear Diary with Alexis. Bruno, I feel, is a very appropriate one. He'll be our guest next
sorry,
week,
Bruno.
So. we'll bring that up to him. We'll talk about
I'm talking about old men and Koivu. Koivu was in his mid-20s in the time that I wrote this. I was 10, so everyone seemed old to me. But he's not that old.
Oh
when
my
I wrote
goodness,
this.
ridiculous.
Fred wanted a good funny one. He's been telling me all I've been doing is bad ones, and he's not even here to hear this. So Fred, that one was for you.
That was for you, Fred. Well, again, thank you guys for tuning in, checking us out. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your friends. We want to keep growing. We're going to come every week with new content. We got more great guests lined up in the future. So definitely be sure to hit that subscribe, share, follow us on all of our social media channels. I know Twitter, Facebook, Instagram,
YouTube.
YouTube. We got YouTube where you'll be watching this, or our lovely faces.
Yeah.
Also want to give a shout out to 10,000 Takes, who were nice enough to have us as a part of their soda stream this week with a bunch of other media personalities to raise some money for Groveland Food Bank. So that was a lot of fun. I really thought that was nice to be included and hang out for a little bit. I don't know why anybody would want to hang out with me, but
literally when I saw the lineup, I'm like, why the hell was I included in all of these actually cool people? Like,
right. Where does my name fit in here? Also shout out to our friends over at Too Many Men podcast who had me on to do the Claws for a Cause, another fundraising, which is more my thing. I'm a flip cup person, so that's definitely a lot easy. So that was really fun. And again, a shout out to Lockdown Wild and Giles and the Goalie, who had us on for a fun Around the Horn. So be sure to give all of those things a listen, follows. They're all good people, just like us.
It's a season of collaboration.
Exactly.
Everyone is striving to get content. We just are all teaming up together. So
exactly. So give them a look or listen. And again, thanks to them. Thanks to Fred putting this whole thing together here. Thanks to Alexis for sharing your intimate wild takes.
You know, it's what I do. I'm a man of the people.
Yeah. So, but thanks to you guys for tuning in. Have a great one. Bye.